culture they want and then shaping the culture effectively.
Okay, now it's much clearer. Please go ahead, proceed. The floor is all yours, so please proceed with the presentation. Thank you very much.
Okay, great. Okay, so just a little bit of background. Senn Delaney's been in this business of culture shaping for 40 years. You can see on the map over 46 countries around the world. I've been lucky enough to work in over 30, helping leaders shape their cultures to effectively execute strategy. Sample clients, these are not all of our clients, but around the world, most of our clients are organizations that are successful, are doing well in the market, but want to stay that way, want to stay out in front. So that's our background. So what are we facing right now? What are most of the leaders, when we sit down with the CEO, CHRO, anybody in the C-suite, what are the things they're facing right now? And this is the context for culture. We have a world that's facing a simultaneous convergence, that's social media, internet, etc., and fragmentation. There's a different model of business in Asia, Middle East, North America, Europe. They're distinctly different in their approach to business. So convergence and fragmentation. China is slowing. U.S. political landscape is a big question mark. Brexit, which is Britain leaving Europe, the possibility. The challenge in the Middle East at the moment, especially in Syria. Then there's a number of other situations that CEOs, C-suite players are thinking about right now in terms of cybersecurity, finding and keeping the best talent, dealing with big data and the Internet of Things. It is a complex and fast-moving world. Now, we all know that individuals who have a good sense of self and a healthy sense of self, when difficulty comes or when complexity comes, they're able to navigate it easily. We also all know individuals that when they don't have a good sense of self, when difficulty comes, they get knocked sideways. Same thing's true for organizations. If an organization has clarity of who it is and has a healthy way of doing business, this complex environment that I've outlined here is far more navigable. So recently, the author of Blink and Tipping Point, Malcolm Gladwell, made the statement that I've become convinced that culture is the most important predictor of where a company is going. Not where it's been, not where it is, but where it's going. That clarity of sense of self and healthy performance across the organization is the critical factor around whether the organization will effectively navigate a faster moving, more complex world and establish itself as one of the successful companies going forward. So it doesn't matter. Recently, Booz and Company, they used to be Booz Allen, they went out to find out from the world, what do you think about culture? And as you can see on the slide, 84% of those they talked to agree that an organization's culture is critical to success. When I started in this business 22 years ago, I would have said that number would have been about 10%. So a vast change. 60% say culture is more important than strategy or operating model. They're absolutely right, because as we'll look at it, culture determines whether your strategy or operating model works. Given the importance that those first two circles show, an amazing 51% of those respondents said that their culture is in need of an overhaul, needs to be changed. So it's critical, and more than half say they don't have the culture they need to execute in the market the way they'd like to execute. So what is it? Culture, very simply. It's how we do things around here. It's the accepted patterns of behavior. It's the norms, the values, the beliefs. It reflects on what you care about in the organization, whether you care about the customer and profit, or if you think about internal drivers. What are people being measured by? So in essence, it's how people do business day in, day out, every day of the year. So we're going to look at what drives that and how do you shift that if it's not working for you. A deeper look at when you're looking at culture and you want to ask yourself some questions about what kind of culture do we have. The first one is, for me, one of the most important. Does our organization culturally look out towards the customer and think customer first, or is it internally oriented, looking at how we do business, how we work with each other, etc., inward looking? Is the culture trusting or not? Do people play it safe? Is it collaborative or individualistic, accountable or blaming? Is there the right energy, or does it feel flat, dispirited? Do you see people with curiosity and willingness to learn, change, innovate, remaining agile, or is it judgmental and stuck? Is it self-centered, or people operating for the greater good, embracing or resistant of change? Is it purposeful, or is it transactional? Is it agile or slow? Now, anybody in a senior leader question is going to ask, job is going to ask those questions. And getting the answers will give you a view as to whether your culture is serving you or it's causing a challenge for you. A number of years back, Lou Gerstner took over IBM. IBM was failing at the time. Lou did everything you'd expect. He put in the strategy, the marketing, the financial management, all the systems and process. He divested, he invested. What he found, even with all of the things he did, all of the good work, is that culture isn't just one aspect of the game, it is the game. The culture of IBM at that time was not serving them. His main focus was to get the culture right so that all the other things that the organization was doing would stick. Story is apocryphal now because IBM went from a dying organization to a global powerhouse through the lens of culture. So does it impact performance? Well, that's an obvious one. Does the way your people work with each other, with your suppliers, with your customers, every single day impact performance? It's an obvious question. But here's some evidence. One of our colleagues, Colin Price, wrote a book a number of years back in terms of competitive advantage of culture. EBITDA margin for those organizations with top quartile cultures versus bottom quartile, the advantage is 2.2x. Growth in enterprise value to book value, 2x. Growth in net income to sales, 1.5. So on average, there is a 2x advantage in terms of having a culture that's aligned and healthy and in the top quartile. So the opportunity is there. Similarly, if you look at customers, employees, and how they view you as an organization. So let's look at customers. 68% of customers leave because of poor employee attitude. Employee attitude is culture. 41% of customers are loyal because of employee attitude. Again, culture. 70% of customer brand perception, how they see you as a business, how they define you as a business in dinner conversations and with their friends, comes down to their experiences with people. That's culture. If you look internally, 51% less employee turnover when you have a high-performing culture. 27% less absenteeism, 18% more productivity, and 12% more profitability. Everywhere you look, there are too many books on culture and performance today. However, every one of them, every study keeps on coming back and saying, both internally and externally, it changes performance. Here's some of our clients, the ones that have allowed us to talk about what we've done. Focusing on culture, I'll just share a few of them because there's too long to list. Rolls-Royce, they build aerospace equipment, engines, gas turbine engines for airplanes primarily. Their challenge was $1 billion locked up in inventory and about 30% on-time delivery. For an engineering and manufacturing business, that is not a winning equation. Through culture, changing the way they do business across the entire value stream, liberated $500 million in inventory buffers, which is liberating cash for reinvestment, and they moved from 30% to 80% on-time delivery. I'll give you one other. Proximus, which was formerly Belgacom, the Belgian telco. Now, telcos are not known for being agile, fleet-to-foot, customer-focused. This organization hadn't grown in at least 10 years. It also hadn't hit a cost target in living memory. Through the lens of culture, and we'll look at what they did, they were able to first grow for the first time in all those years, second, met its cost target, and that some believe hit its cost target for the first time in history. If you go down that page, time and time again, if you focus on culture, you focus it on what you want to drive from a performance perspective, it becomes a powerful tool for business improvement. As a side note, Proximus was known as one of the poorest customer service organizations in Belgium. They've turned that around, and they're in the top 3 now and recognized as a customer-centric organization. So where do you need to focus? If you're focusing on culture, it does not sit on its own. It sits in relationship to strategy and structure. So strategy, how you're going to meet your markets, where you're going to play as a business, where you're not going to play. You know, your brand, your purpose. Then there's structure, which is your organizational capability. There's organizational structure, but then there's management process, talent, competencies, etc. And then there's culture. Culture is the mindset, the behavior, the attitudes, the beliefs, and the organization. When those 3 are in alignment, when your culture makes sense for your structure and your strategy, and the 3 are in alignment, it just feels easier doing business, and performance falls out of that. That's the finding that Colin Price had, is when those 3 things are in alignment, you have a 2x advantage. Recently, there was the CEO Conference Board paper that went out 2014. Leaders around the world agree that when those 3 are aligned, organizations perform better. So getting better alignment between strategy, culture, and organizational capabilities was the #1 strategy named by CEOs. So they know it. It's clear that it makes a difference. Most don't deal with culture effectively. So what you end up with is an organization that changes strategy, where they're going to meet their market and serve their customers. They restructure, change process, change systems, change compensation, but they never deal with the culture, the legacy culture, the habits of the organization. Most CEOs I've talked to over the years, they're very, very clear that they're on the right strategy. They've changed the organization. It's just moving too slowly. It's proving too much work. All that is trying to execute a new strategy and a new structure with an old culture that does not match. And it becomes like the anchor out of the back of the boat. It's dragging behind and slowing you down. So the same energy and the same focus and the same discipline that is required to shift strategy and structure needs to be applied to culture if you want the 3 in alignment. I'll give you an example. This is North America. I haven't lived in North America for over 20 years, so I won't feel too bad about this. Southwest Airlines, largest airline in America today. Southwest has a very, very simple purpose, and that is to originally democratize the skies, open up flight to people that couldn't afford flight at the time. They figured out a strategy that worked, and that is a low-cost airline that uses point-to-point service, which means no hubs. So flying planes from place to place, but no hub. The structure, very simple. One-size plane. That simplifies SKUs, that simplifies maintenance, replacement, getting a new plane out, very easy. And the whole organization is focused on one thing, and that is gate turnaround time. So when you're at a gate, you are paying gate fees. If you're late leaving a gate, you are paying penalties. Now, what Southwest realized is if they left the gate on time and they were in the air and the seats were full, they could make money, which is usually the intention of a business. So they executed this model, and they become the biggest airline in that country. So United Airlines, who I'm still questioning whether they've ever made money, thought, that looks like a good idea. You can make money flying people around the world. They initiated a company called TED. And what they did is they reverse engineered the strategy, which is low cost point to point. They re-engineered the structure, single side plane, focused on gate turnaround time. So what happened to TED? Well, first of all, TED does not exist. They lasted 4 years, 5 years, and then went out of business. There was absolutely nothing wrong with their strategy. It is a winning strategy, and nothing wrong with the structure. The only difference between the two organizations is culture. Southwest has a very healthy, customer-centered, positive and energetic, flexible and adaptable, highly accountable culture. TED inherited the United Airlines culture, which is more procedure-driven, it's slow, it's bureaucratic, there's a lot of blame, territorial. Their culture undid the strategy. Now, when we go from industry to industry, I mentioned telcos a moment ago. Almost every telco in the world has the same strategy, and that is to be fixed line, mobile, broadband, and TV. And the reason for that multi-platform strategy is to reduce churn, because churn, customer acquisition, is the biggest cost in their business. Many thought that having that four-pronged strategy would give them advantage. It won't, because everybody else has the same strategy. The only difference will be, do they have a culture that can truly execute that strategy, as in the Southwest example? TED, on the other hand, they had a good strategy, they had a good direction, and it failed. So what happened? You know, any organization is going to have strategies and initiatives, whether it's around growth or customer or digital or globality or compliance. Very rarely are those strategies or initiatives wrong. But what happened with TED is they fed it through what we'll call the jaws of culture. So the jaws of culture, when you feed good ideas in, they chew them up, and what you put in is more than what you get out. So if there are turf issues, if there's hierarchy, blaming, bureaucracy, lack of accountability, lack of trust, lack of alignment, the best of ideas don't make it through those jaws with anywhere near the return that you're looking for. So those jaws of culture, the bad news about them is they tend to chew with their mouth closed. So you can't feel it or see it, you can't hear it, but you can definitely feel it. So leaders are often saying, we're doing the right stuff, and it's not delivering the right results. That's the jaws of culture frustrating the effort. Everybody's heard this saying before, but culture eats strategy for breakfast. It is the dominant factor in success and execution. On the opposite end of the equation, and we'll share some examples of companies and what they did, culture can be a distinctive advantage. It can be the launch pad, the platform for driving your strategy, meeting your customer differently, and executing along cost lines. So I'll give you some examples. Here's Limited Brands. They own Bath & Body Works, Victoria's Secret, and a lot of other platforms. Limited Brands, it's a retail business. Anybody who might be on this webinar that's in retail knows it's one of the toughest industries anyone could ever join. Razor thin margins, fierce competition, and a world economy that's not sure what it wants to do. So what has Limited Brands done between 2006 and now? Going through a major recession and a few mini ones. Believe it or not, they've delivered the best shareholder value in the world over the past 15 years. If you'd asked me who's delivered the greatest shareholder value in the world out of large organizations, I would have said Google, I would have said Apple, and it wasn't them. It was Limited Brands, which is a retail organization. They're the most admired specialty retailer based on Fortune magazine. They were measured as one of the most agile companies. And then they're number one in world associate opinion polls around people feeling valued as an associate and decisions reflecting care for the customer. Les Wexner, the chairman, major owner of the business, is very clear that culture is what's enabled them to navigate a major recession, several smaller recessions, and outcompete not just the retail category, which isn't entirely tough to do because many are failing or going out of business, but to be the best performer in shareholder value over those 15 years. Another example, Yum Brands. They own KFC, Pizza Hut, Taco Bell, as well as a number of other properties. Years back, David Novak was handed the crown to run KFC when PepsiCo took the restaurant businesses out of PepsiCo. It was seen as the poison chalice. You know, the drinks were good, snacks were good, nobody wanted restaurants. The reason nobody wanted restaurants is they were falling down, they were sliding into C and D markets and not performing well in same-store sales. David's first focus was to turn the culture upside down, to focus on a culture that serves the stores and serves the manager of those stores, and was determined to make Yum Brands a different business. They are now the fastest growing QSR in the world, quick service restaurant, even if we exclude China. They have the best industry same-store sales, 100% reduction in frontline attrition, which is a huge cost in quick service restaurants, and the consistency of quality matched with flexibility and experience is best in class in their category. Now, David is on our website. It's very clear that culture is what's driven that change in Yum Brands. So what did the two focus on? Years back, we became very clear that we needed to understand what determines a leader that will be in the top 10% of performance no matter where you put them, and what are the key components to top 10% performing organizations. We worked with several universities across the globe, thousands of participants amongst our client companies and other companies around the world. Three things came out, and this is what differentiates limited brands and Yum Brands from other companies. We call it a state of thriving, and it is at least a 72% predictor of top 10% performance and an 80+% predictor of having a culture where people feel engaged. The three things. First is purpose and direction. Absolute clarity on who they are, why they exist, why the world's a better place for them. Decisions follow that. Vitality. A good positive energy, great collaboration, trust, transparency, people being engaged in solving things. And then the last is a growth mindset, a willingness to learn, grow, change, iterate, do things differently, challenge the status quo every single day. When you get the three of these into alignment so that they are actually in synergy, you get the performance that limited brands and Yum have driven. Those are the three lenses. Now I'm going to look at purpose and direction, vitality, and growth mindset with another client. We work with CVS, world's largest pharmacy drugstore. Their purpose is to bring health to the communities in which they serve. As they engaged their organization and looked at how do we change, how do we do things differently, they realized that they sold tobacco products in their stores. Now, to serve their communities and bring health to their communities and sell tobacco products did not work for them. They took a roughly $7 billion category out of their stores because it didn't match who they wanted to be. That decision has paid back ×2 in the market because people in the marketplace, people who work for the company, realized the firm actually believed what it stood for, and the vitality of the organization, the willingness to change, enabled that change to happen. That's the thriving dimension when you're looking at organizational performance. So how do you know if a place is thriving? It's very easy. Essentially, you walk into it and you get a feeling of the energy in the organization. We've all worked in teams where the energy is high and positive and energetic, and we know it has an impact on results and performance. Probably most of us have also worked in teams where the energy was low and dispirited or flat. Different impact on results, different impact on engagement. Probably also works in organizations where the energy is high, but it's going all over the place. It's hectic and scattered. Again, different impact. So when you have that high positive energy that's focused, moving in the same direction, it's a good indicator that you're moving in the direction of being a thriving organization. Different ways to look at energy. First, high energy, high positive, which is energetic, enthusiastic, optimistic. That's easy to see. But there's also low positive. And organizations don't necessarily value it enough, which is taking time to reflect and learn and be grateful. Then there's high negative, which is angry, hostile, aggressive. Low negative, worried, depressed, possibly passive aggressive. There's no doubt that that energy gives you an idea of the culture you have. It's a reflection of the culture you have and a reflection of the sustainability of the results in front of you. Here's another way to look at energy. We call this the mood lift or the mood elevator. Energy comes from leaders, leaders of teams, leaders of organizations. And as individuals, we're always in a mood. Every moment of our life, we are in a mood. We're somewhere on this mood lift. So we can be down at the bottom and irritated or frustrated or judgmental, or at the top, creative, hopeful, compassionate, patient. We're going to be somewhere. All the mood is in an individual is an indicator of the quality of their thinking at that moment. Now that tells you where your head is. Now we all know that we've often in our life said or done things that didn't get us the result in the end when we said it from a low mood. If you think to home, and when you're just going to give that feedback, the way you do it doesn't get you the result. We're also not as intelligent when we're in a low mood. We lose capacity to be wise, be insightful, see the bigger picture. High mood, different. Now, almost every organization we've worked with, when you walk in the door, there's a set of values. And they'll say something like, we have integrity, we're collaborative, we're accountable, we're customer-oriented, etc. There's going to be a list. No organization has on their wall their values are, we're frustrated, we're bothered, we're defensive, and impatient. No one would have that as a set of values. So for leaders to walk in the building and live in a low mood, but expect values that exist at the top of this mood lift, doesn't make sense. So if you want to generate a different energy, you also have to have leaders that are aware of the energy they bring. So when they're coming to work in the morning, they're not just thinking about the things I need to do. They're thinking about what energy do I need to bring and getting themselves to the top end of this mood elevator so they can represent the best of what you want in terms of values. So what has been the strategy we've seen in most organizations around reshaping culture, getting the culture right? You have a slide in front of you that captures it. So as you can see, good work, but I think we need just a little more detail right here. Often we'll come to an organization and they'll be focused on pay, performance management, leader development, etc. So they'll have some streams that tangentially have to do with culture and people. But somewhere there's an expected miracle that all those things are doing are going to have a miracle and they're going to get the culture they want. And it just doesn't work that way. 15 years ago, as a firm, we wanted to find out why, as a firm, we had a number of clients where the results were astounding both to us and to the client. Yum Brands at that time would have been one of those. Limited would be one of those. Then why were there a number of clients where it met our expectations, there was a good change, and met their expectations? And then in all honesty, why were there few clients that the change didn't stick? So we got a third-party organization to go out and find out. And they identified 4 things in the most successful culture transformations that we've been involved with. And first is purposeful leadership. It starts with the CEO and the top team. They cannot sponsor it. They cannot bless it. They have to lead it. So if you have a I'll sponsor it or somebody on my team will sponsor it, you've already started on a losing path. It starts with the top team and they have to change first. They have to have a business rationale and equation for doing it. And the shadow they cast must be consistent with the culture you want. That's going to require personal change, a different way of doing things, each individual. The third is broad engagement. If you don't go top to bottom and pretty rapidly, the old culture will win. Well, culture wants to stay the same, so you must overwhelm it. And then where most people think is first, your institutional practices, which are performance management, pay, leadership development, succession planning, all have to be in line with your culture. If you do all four, the culture will be reshaped. I'm confident of that. If you leave any one off, you will lose value and you'll lose impact. So let's look at personal change. Most personal change efforts have to do, like I said, with 360 measurement, focusing people on KPIs, personal development programs, lining people up with strategy, etc. That's all the outside-in element to change, which is required. You need to make it clear what you want from people, where they should be focused, and where they need to grow. That's only half the equation, though. What most organizations forget is that behavior is a choice. And we're choosing all the time. People are doing what makes sense to them at that moment. So you have to have an approach that helps people unlock unconscious habits or beliefs or assumptions that are holding them where they are. And from the inside out, choosing to do things differently. You need to have both, outside in or inside out. But without the inside out, people choosing to join you in a different way of doing things, you won't get the impact. I'll give you an example. So inside out is about shifting culture and beliefs at the thinking level, those thought habits, the ways you do things, not at the behavioral level. The outside in approach looks at the behavioral level. And I'll call that the dieting approach to change. So people will focus on, let's say I go on a diet and I start to eat certain foods, I will change my behavior. It will last best 2 weeks, or worst 2 weeks, best 2 months. And that's because my thinking about health and well-being hasn't shifted. I'll apply the behaviors for a while, but they won't stick. If I have a fundamental shift in thinking about health and well-being, that has an impact on my behavior and has a different impact on my results. The change has to happen at that thinking level. The behaviors follow that. And then you obviously get different results. Now, is there any proof of that? Why does it have to happen at the thinking or the mindset level? McKinsey went out and did a study a number of years back. In successful transformations, I mean, these are startling facts, but those organizations that focused at the mindset level, transformational level, at the mindset level, 71% of the CEOs felt very or entirely satisfied that the change took place and they got the results they wanted. With those that knew that mindset was important but didn't focus enough on it, 23% thought that they had had success. In those changes, that mindset was not identified, not changed. Only 1% found it was successful. So the difference in successful transformation is at that mindset level. Okay, so I'm going to share one last principle because I think we're coming up on the 40 minutes because it is the most important principle in culture shaping. And it has to do with the shadow of leadership. So in organizations, years back, it became clear that the behavior in organizations mirrored almost one for one the behavior and mindset of their leaders. So what the leaders were doing was what people were following, not what the leaders were saying. Now, if you think about our personal lives, there are a lot of habits, behaviors, etc. each one of us displays that we know when we reflect on it we got from our parents. And often those are things that our parents didn't tell us to do, we just picked them up. And if you have children, you can see behaviors and mannerisms in your children that come from you. And often they're not things that you've said they should do, they just do them, they pick that up. The reason we do that is that we look up to our parents as role models. Same thing's true in organizations, especially when you have leaders that are, in an organization where leaders have a powerful shadow, people will be looking to them to understand what does it take to be successful here? What are the right behaviors? And if the actions of the leaders, behavior of leaders, and the words of leaders do not match, people will go with the behavior every time. That's why principle number 1 of culture shaping is purposeful leadership. The top team CEO have to cast a shadow, because when you engage the organization, it will have no credibility if the leadership are out of step with it. There's 6 areas that I'd look at shadow through. Does the top team truly represent a customer orientation? This is part of it. We've done these. This is actual diagnostics on a client of the top team. So the shadow impact, is it customer oriented? Do words and actions match? Do people choose the right thing, do the right thing? So ethics. Performance orientation, so accountability, drive. Collaboration, does the top team work together? Do their teams work across boundaries and for the good of the customer? What's that feeling of energy? Is it positive, optimistic? Is it hopeful? Is it focused and balanced? And then the last one is change and agility. How are the leaders willing to change, do things differently, be different as leaders? Because if you want an organization to be agile, leaders have to be agile themselves. Those would be the lenses through which you'd look at shadow. Now, all organizations have cultures. Anytime you get more than 3 people together, 3 or more, you're going to get a culture. Families have cultures, clubs have cultures, teams have cultures, organizations have cultures. I've become clear, over the 20 plus years I've been doing this, that the world seems to have 2 groups. There are people who I'll call shapers. They will go into an environment and they will shape the environment they want. And then there's probably a bigger group that I'd call shapees. They go in and figure out, how does this place work? How do I fit in? And they get shaped. If you're reshaping culture, your leaders have to be shapers. Because if they're not, you'll get a culture by default. If they are, you can get the culture you want by design. Proof in the pudding. Years back, we worked with Airbus UK. They were making the wings for the 380. Leader Phil Swash, terrific leader we worked with, he realized early why this shadow matters so much and what his role was in it. He realized that technology can be copied relatively easily and relatively cheaply. So can process. So other companies, other countries could pick up their process or their technology relatively easily. The main thing he realized, their competitive advantage came down to culture. How do we work together? How do we liberate the knowledge in this organization most effectively? And that is nearly impossible to copy. So his learning was, it started with him, it started with his executive team, and though for many years he saw culture as soft, he realized that it was anything but the soft option. It was the toughest thing to change, but the only one that would create differentiation for Airbus. Phil was a quintessential shaper, not a shaping. So that's the end of my comments on culture at 40 minutes, and I will open it up to questions.
Well, thank you very much for a very, very interesting presentation. Folks, we are now open for the question and answers. If you have any questions, you could put it in the question box, or you could equally raise your hand. There's a hand icon available on the console, so if you click on it, you can talk to Mr. Dustin also. So let me go straight I understand there were a few callers who have raised a hand. We have the first one. We have Brother Mahmoud Sharaf. Brother, you have raised your hand. Could you please ask the question and introduce yourself? Brother Mahmoud Sharaf, can you hear me? Let me mute and move to another caller who's raised a hand. We have Brother Fahad Alam Rozgi. Fahad, could you please introduce yourself and ask the question? Hello, Brother Fahad, can you hear me? Could you please introduce yourself and ask the question? Fahad Alam. Hello, Fahad, can you hear me? Unfortunately, Fahad has raised a hand, but unfortunately cannot hear. So let me go to the questions. You have talked about successful culture shaping. Is there anything different in your experience or approach when engaging in these efforts in Saudi and the Gulf?
I'm sorry, is that when engaging in the effort in Saudi and the Gulf? I
Yes.
think that was the question. Okay, so that's a great question, and there are a couple ways to look at it. First, I would say, I'm going to give you the answer, no, there's nothing different in that people around the world in organizations usually start from good intention, and they want to be the best they can be. And there are a value set that seems to be true throughout the world in terms of caring for the customer, around working well with colleagues, around owning results and being accountable, about ethics and integrity, that in my experience, 35 plus countries working in them are true everywhere in the world. And true, I'm on my way to the Gulf on Friday, with every client I've worked with in the Gulf and Saudi. So they're human, the best of human beings. It's consistent around the world. That's the no, there's no difference. There is some difference, and the challenges are, one of the principles of shaping is that it starts at the top and starts with the CEO being willing to say, I need to do things differently. My experience in the region is that is a tougher equation for a leader to step out and be that vulnerable and be open to the fact that if they're asking the organization to change, they also need to role model that change. And that's usually for my clients the hurdle, I wouldn't say obstacle, but getting used to that notion of being vulnerable in front of other people, the people who look to them for leadership, to open up an opportunity for others to be willing to change themselves. So that would be the one difference. Our experience if I focus on Saudi specifically, years back I was told this will never work in Germany, and a few years later I was told this will never work. You can't change culture in China. And then I was told it would never work in Saudi. And our clients in Saudi have been some of the proudest moments of my career and some of the best work. And we saw very little difference, just a real enthusiasm for doing things better. Any other questions?
Yes, we have another one from Brother Ayman Al-Khalawi. Question is, how can you change the culture of the CEO himself who needs a cultural change, but he thinks that he's on the right?
That links back to what I was saying a moment ago. That is a tough one, because no one will change until they see the value for themselves. They see that it means something for themselves. Very tough to change a culture without helping that CEO to change the way they do things. So in my case, I can just tell you how I help establish that equation for the CEO. and it may or may not help. So the CEO is a very lonely seat. You're the last one. You're the one that has to make the decisions. So there are concerns and worries about the business, where it is, what you want to try to get done, that keep the CEO up at night. So if I were helping a CEO see the value in changing themselves and changing the culture, I would start with what's keeping you up at night. What's not happening the way you want? What could happen that would injure the business? And then I'd link the habits of the culture in the organization to that particular thing, whatever it is that's as their greatest concern. And then I'd be asking them, if you want to see this different behavior so you can get this issue resolved or this result achieved, how will you lead? How will you do things differently? Now, that's with a leader that might be open to change. The other opportunity is sometimes you do have a leader that's very reticent about changing. You'll probably find a few champions in their top team that are actually more open to it. And I might, in that case, look for what I'll call a culture leadership team, which would be a subset of that top team that would act on behalf of the CEO to lead. You'd still work with the CEO and the senior team, but in terms of leading and engaging the organization in culture shaping, I would leverage those 3 or 4 champions that would act as surrogate to the CEO if the CEO finds that path too uncomfortable. The second option has all sorts of risks all over it, but it is an option that we've seen work before.
Thank you very much. Let me go back. Mr. Brother Mahmoud Sharaf has requested once again. Let me see to unmute him. He had raised his hand. Oh, just a second. Yes, Brother Mahmoud Sharaf, I've just unmuted you. Can you hear us, or could you please introduce yourself?
Yes, I can hear you. This is Mahmoud from Dr. Samal Habib Hospital in Qasim. I have really thank you, me and my team here, for a very informative presentation. Now, you know, in the hospital, it's a dynamic environment with changes that is, happening rapidly. Now, thriving is the responsibility of the leader to have this with the staff, or it is his own responsibilities. He's the one, looking and showing the vitality and purpose and the growth and the mindset. And we would like also to know now, if this is the part of his responsibilities, would this still put all the change and the shift in culture still his responsibilities by, lead by example, or it should be also the worries of the staff in there? Yes.
So can you let me, what industry, can you say your industry again?
I'm the manager of the Dr. Salah Habib Hospital in Qasim, and hospital is a dynamic area. It's like the B cell, where everyone is coming and leaving and getting services, mobility of staff, of money, of services. So here you can feel how important is thriving in this environment. So the viability, yeah.
Okay, excellent. So we're just curious. So the question, if I understand it right, the leader of the organization has the primary role in terms of them being the message, the shadow of the ultimate leader and the shadow of the top team. So what does it mean for the staff? In our experience in culture shaping, if you don't shift mindset, because organizations are made individual by individual, if you don't shift the mindset top to bottom, so that there's an added responsibility on the leader, but you need to shift the mindset right through the staff population so that they are clear about why the culture matters to them and what are their habits that get in the way of getting better results and doing things differently. So it is a great responsibility on the leader and leadership team, but there's equal responsibility in each individual taking ownership and thinking, how in my role or how in my area of the business do I need to do things? It can't just be on the leader, and the leader shines a better light, because the organization will have a lot of habits, and individuals will have a lot of habits that are out of step with that. So process of shifting the thinking and habits of the organization top to bottom is required. Especially, in an organization where we're working with a number of organizations where the leader may have somewhere between 15,000 and 300,000-400,000 employees. The leader can cast a different shadow, but the employees out in other countries, way out in the business, never see that leader. So then the accountability is around the local supervisor, the person that's with them. The shadow of that supervisor or manager has to be consistent with what the organization wants. And you can't demand it. You have to create an opportunity for them to shift their thinking, and that's through an insight-based, inside-out learning model. So you get the shadow out in the business at the front edge, consistent with what you want. Now, hopefully that answered your question.
Yes, it is very clear. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Brother
Any other
Mahmoud,
questions?
for the question. We have a few other questions, so let me go quickly. We have one from Brother Ahmed Muharram. The question is, in the McKinsey study, you said that organizations have to understand their employees' mindset. How exactly do you do that? And how does a mindset affect a culture in the first place?
Tell me the second half of the question again.
And how does a mindset affect a culture in the first place?
Okay, excellent. Okay, so I'll share in our work how we go about doing that, because we'll work on, we showed the cone with the thinking, thought habits, that's mindset. And that drives behavior, and then that drives results. So we will actually work backwards with top teams in the diagnostic phase, looking at the results they need to achieve and what behavior is required. And then we'll work back to the mindset that generates that behavior. So if you want openness to change and agility, the mindset has to be a growth mindset, willingness to be a lifelong learner, willingness to try and experience and change, willingness to fail and learn from failure. That's the mindset. So we'll define that up front. Then people don't change mindset based on information. It's been proven. Our brain, the part of our brain that uses information and language is our frontal lobe. And it's not responsible for decision-making or behavioral change. What's used in behavioral change is our limbic mind, which is our old reptile mind, they call it. It's the small bit in the middle. It's not our logic center. It cannot understand language. So the limbic system uses experience for learning. So if you're going to change behavior, you need to create an experience that unfreezes the old thinking at that limbic level. And if you don't change it there, if you give somebody, I'll give you an example. If I give you a paper that says you should be more agile, more collaborative, and more accountable, you'll probably agree with it all. That's your frontal lobe. If I create an experience where you actually see where you're not agile, or you have an experience where you see where you're not accountable, or you see where you're not collaborative, and you recognize that habit of thinking that's not working for you, that experience bypasses the frontal lobe and changes behavior at the limbic level. That's where sustainable behavioral change happens. Your frontal lobe will then take over, and it will start to systematize and figure out how to live that behavior day in, day out. But your frontal lobe is unable to change behavior, only your limbic. So we have an approach that actually creates experiences for people to catch themselves in their habits of thinking. And when they catch themselves in their habits of thinking and they see, is that working for me or not? And if it's not, that shifts the mindset or the belief about the value of that thinking. That's how you go about changing mindset. You need to define it, But then you need to create an experience where people actually feel and experience what it would be like to be more agile, more accountable, more collaborative, more customer-oriented, beyond that frontal lobe, beyond logic, and have a personal change in mindset.
Thank you very much. We have another caller who's raised a hand. I'm also looking just at the time, so I request if you could just be precise in your questions. Dr. Muhammad Saeed Dardi, would you please introduce yourself and ask a question?
Hello?
Yes, doctor, we can hear you.
Hello?
Yes, doctor, can you hear us? Okay, doctor, you muted yourself again, so let me unmute you. Dr. Muhammad Saeed Dardi, we have just unmuted you. Could you please ask the question and introduce yourself also?
Okay, my name is Dr. Mohammed Saeed Dardir. I am a management consulting, local consultant in Saudi Arabia. I've been in the market for the past 16 years. During my experience, I did not see a lot of the new mechanism of organization behavior, organization culture, and organization issue. And I know the value of the culture versus the climate, but how we can identify the characteristics of organizational culture?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
How we can identify the...
So I'll tell you, you're absolutely right. And I think what you were saying that climate or engagement surveys, they're valuable and they do what you need to assess climate and organizational engagement. Measuring culture is a different thing. And there are a couple of things that I would consider in measuring culture. First, we do diagnostics on the front, and we measure culture, which is built around the 6 categories I mentioned, which is customer orientation, level of performance orientation, level of collaboration, level of agility, the positive spirit or the feeling in the organization, and integrity. That gives you a snapshot of the culture, but it doesn't give you enough because it gives you an idea of what are the behaviors and what is the prevailing culture. It doesn't tell you why, and it doesn't tell you what matters to people in the organization that actually generates that culture. So what we do is that working back through those behaviors, through regression analysis, get back to the 4 or 5 key drivers, the things that wake people up in the morning, get them to work, the things that matter most to those people in the business. If you can unlock the culture through those key drivers, you get the behavior you want. So you have to work your way there. From there, we actually do a further regression to do analysis on where you are against the thriving model I shared, which is purpose, vitality, and growth mindset, and where your strengths and challenge areas are and gaps around that thriving model. So we're working back from behavior to drivers to the mindset that is either enabling or disabling those drivers and building the change effort from there. So that's our approach. We believe that any organization, even if you're doing culture, which is a massive shift, a big effort, and a usually large transformation, you can probably focus on 4 or 5 things at most. And that's the reason for the regression. Get back to the 3 to 5 that matter most, and they're the things that are going to drive a change in the organization from a cultural perspective, and build from there. So that's our experience. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much, Doctor, for your question. Let me just go to another caller who have just raised a hand. We have Dana Dabhan. Dana, could you hear us? And please introduce yourself and ask a question. Dana, you raised your hand.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Please introduce yourself.
Yes, my name is Dana, and I'm an HR consultant from Saudi Arabia. I have a question regarding the last answer that has been discussed. How can we really do unlocking the unconscious mindset, and is it through workshops? How can we do it company-wide? Let's say the strategy is set, the new leader is at hand, they have a new way of dealing with this strategy, but the people mindset is still laid back, and we need to energize them. I'm facing this with more than one client, and I want to find ways how to energize the employee on individual level, doing this massively. And what comes up to my mind is we can do this through coaching and through workshops, but I want to hear from the consultant himself. How can we do that from his own experience?
Okay. And is my screen still visible to people?
Yes, it is.
Can you repeat that again?
Okay, so I skipped one page, just it was based on the time that was allotted, and it has to do with what we experienced works in sustainably shifting mindset top to bottom. And we already talked about diagnostics and what you need to measure. We do use a workshop format, and we only do it in natural work. So two things about reshaping behavior. One is you need to create an experience that catches people in their automatic pilot, their habits, so that they have a moment of aha. Whoa, I didn't know I did that. There's a better way of doing it. But you also need to do that with their nearest peer group. So we do it in a natural work team. You know, we as adults are as influenced by our peers as our kids are. It's amazing, but we don't change that much. So you need to create, we do workshops for that. Now, our fundamental belief is that we as a consulting firm need to leave the client at some point, that we cannot change their culture. Only they can. So we transfer our capability to do the unfreezing and education to the client so that they can get to whatever it is, 1,000 to 500,000 employees. They own it, they drive it, and it's a consistent experience right through the organization. At the top two levels, the reinforcement is, like you mentioned, there's one-to-one coaching, which is a good way to make change. But outside the team context, on its own, that will prove a challenge. But if you have the unfreezing or the experience that energizes, and you coach off the back of that, you'll get better impact. Also, you do need to get the team will make commitments when they change a way of doing things. You're going to need a few way stations to make sure they're still on track. Then apply, how do we hold meetings? The number of hours people spend in meetings, if you don't change the culture of meetings, you won't change the culture of the organization. How do we do decision? How are we, as leaders, how do we define strategy together? So how do we apply it in real time? That's critical for making a mistake. And then measure the individual, measure the team, measure the organization. So the mechanism for getting to lots of people quickly with that big energy and big insight, we as a firm use a workshop model to get there, because it's the most efficient way, and for us thus far, the most impactful way to engage organizations.
All right, thank you very much. That answered my question.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Sister Anna, for a very interesting question. Okay, we're really pressed on time, so let me go, because we still have a couple of questions. So let me take just last one question from Loe Al-Sawad. The question is, thank you very much for this presentation, and my question is, what is the effective cultural shape that we have to follow here?
Sorry, I lost you.
Can you hear me?
Now I can.
Okay. Okay, we have a question from Laoy Al-Sawad. The question is, thank you very much for this presentation. And my question is, what is the effective culture shape that we have to follow here in KSA, or Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, to reach to the perfect shape? And what is the role of the leader, especially in the family, to motivate his family for a good culture shape?
Okay. So the first is that, you know, different culture, there's not a right culture. If you're in quick service restaurants, there are flavors to the culture that will be different than if you're in high-end engineering. And they're not going to be the same. But I would look at these 6 things. I would look at, first, this is for the leader and the culture. What we found, and this links back to Colin Price's assessment of 2x performance advantage in culture, is that the customer orientation, the outward looking, how do we serve our customer, how do we do the best for the customer, would be number 1. Ethics, number 2, you know, do we do what we say and what we do they match? Would we choose the right thing even if it was in the short term painful? So doing the right thing. Is there a level of accountability and ownership of the result, and drive and resilience? Willingness to work with others, hear others, consider others' ideas, share information transparently. Positive spirit is a belief in other people, enthusiasm, optimism. And then agility is willing to change myself, willing to try new things, willing to change the business, and have iterative improvement. Now, for a leader, I'd be looking at, you know, given my industry, given where I am in the maturity of the business, those 6 essential values hold true. But I would say, what is the right recipe in those values for this business where it is? In a what would I say, that for the business, I'd use the same measures. I'm trying to think of a good example. In high-end engineering manufacturing, a Rolls-Royce, say, the aerospace guys, they need a performance orientation and a drive, etc. And they also have 7-year cycles for putting, you know, inventing a new platform, testing a new platform, and maybe even longer before it's on a wing. Limited Brands needs to win in the next 5 minutes. So that performance orientation is going to look a little different in those environments. They're both performance oriented, but they're going to have a different feel to them. So I'd use these lenses, but I would avoid looking for a right and a wrong, but what's right for us, so that these, you know, you'd like to see these 6 values showing up as positive, all 6, but in a way that's right for you as a business and right for you as an organization, the stage the organization is in. So hopefully that answers the question.
Well, thank you very much. That really brings us towards the end of the webinar. We have a couple of more questions, but they can always get back to you, Dustin, I believe. So any concluding remarks that you would like to give before we dismiss out?
Well, I didn't plan on any concluding remarks. I would just say, honestly, from Senn Delaney and my point of view, I don't know who's on the line, but I'm always encouraged that people that are out there that are passionate about getting the best out of people, best out of organizations, creating the best places to work. If you've chosen to join this call, you're one of those people. So I just want to thank you for being committed to that, because the more of us that are committed to that around the world, we are going to make better places to work that do better things for customers and for the world. So thank you.
Thank you indeed for a very, very interesting, intriguing presentation and for taking the time to deliver this valuable information through this platform of Miles. So I really want to thank you on behalf of the Madinah Institute for Leadership and Entrepreneurship. So thank you very much, and thank you to United Arabia also for facilitating and arranging this webinar for us. And thank you all of those who participated in this webinar and for very interesting questions that you posed and making it an interactive experience for all of us. So please stay tuned to webinar.mile.org. The recorded version will be accessible in the next few days, and you can always learn about our upcoming programs and webinars. With that note, we would like to end this webinar, so you all will be automatically dismissed out. Thank you very much. You all have a good day, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're calling from. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you very much.